So effectively, all I've asked you to do is say, describe the following transformations that map some function of x onto each of these things, okay? So let's have a look at the second one then, okay? So you're starting with y is some function of x, could be x squared, x cubed, sine of x, etc. What do you think this second one is? So y equals 2 times f of x. Good, okay, so it's a stretch. In the y direction, perfect. Good, by a scale factor of 2. Perfect, well done. How do you know it's a stretch?
Because you're multiplying before.
Perfect, because you're multiplying, perfect. So this one you're adding, which means it's a translation or a shift. This one you're multiplying, so therefore it's a stretch. How do you know it's in the y direction?
Multiply before.
Good, so you multiply before you apply the function. Or no, you do the function first, then you multiply by 2. But yeah, you got the f of x, then you multiply that. Okay, perfect. What about this one?
Reflection in the x by 1.
Good, excellent. So it's a reflection in the x-axis because you're making all of your output values negative. Perfect, well done. Okay, what about number 4? So slightly more complex ones.
I put reflection in the y by 8.
Okay, so it's a reflection in the y direction. Okay, so in the y-axis. Good, well done. You're absolutely right because this time you're making all of your input values negative first. Then what did you say next?
By 8.
What do you mean by 8?
Positive 8.
Okay, so I think here we need to talk about a brand new transformation. So we've done the reflection, that's what the negative x deals with. We now need to deal with a brand new transformation. So we then got to deal with the plus 8, okay? Now in general, if I just gave you like f of x plus 8, what transformation would that be?
It will be translation
Good.
in the y by 8.
Perfect. So that's what I want to say, okay? So it's a translation in the y direction by 8 units up, okay? So 8 units upwards. Okay, it's always good to put the kind of direction in there. You don't necessarily need to because you can apply by positive or negative, whether it's up or down, but it's always good to show that you understand it's upwards. Okay, which order do these two things come in? So is it this one first, followed by this one, or is it the other way around? This one first, followed by this one?
The first one, then this one.
How do you know it's that way round? How do you know it's blue followed by red?
Because that one is x and the 8 is outside the bracket.
Absolutely. So it's always happening in the order in which you apply a value through this function. Okay? So if you put a value in here, fairly obviously you're going to do the negative first, then the function, then the plus 8 last. Okay? So the order of the transformations always happen in the same order that you apply them when you put an x value in. Okay? So in other words, that one first, then that one. You may be marked down if you do them in the wrong direction, in the wrong order. Okay? Because the order does matter. Okay, so just be careful of that, but that's good. All right, what about this one?
Translation in the x by negative 5.
Hang on a minute. So it's a translation
Yeah.
in the x direction. I definitely agree with that because it's happening to the x by how many units?
Negative 5.
What do you mean negative 5? So in other words, it moves to the left by 5.
All positive.
Exactly, it's happening in the other direction to what you think it is. You remember those x directions, they're awkward ones, aren't they? So if you've got the x ones, they're the opposite of what you think it should be. So it should be 5 to the right.
And translation in y by 7.
Yes?
And stretched by half.
Okay, which direction is that stretch happening in?
An x.
It's not the x,
Oh, it's the y.
it's the y. It's a similar kind of one to what you're doing here. Because you're doing the multiplication after you've applied the function, it's a stretch in the y direction. Good, so we'll put stretch in the y direction, that's what the half is doing, so it's a stretch in the y direction with a scale factor. What's the scale factor? How much it's being stretched by? Half, perfect. Stretch it half. And you said one other transformation here?
And y by 7.
Perfect, so it's a translation in the y direction by 7 units. Well, in this case it's 7 units up, isn't it? So 7 units up, okay? Are you happy with the order which I've written these things down in? Why not?
I think first the stretch,
Hmm?
then the translation.
So in other words, these two things should be the other way around.
No, the
The first two should be the other way around. It's not, and here's the reason why. Imagine you're going to put a value of x in here. Okay, so imagine you're actually going to come along and stick a value of x in here. Okay, what's the first thing that you would do? So if you stick a value of x in, like 3 or something like that, what's the first thing you do?
I get the value.
You'd take away 5, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You do that, then you take away the 5 first. So in other words, that is the first transformation that happens. Okay, which corresponds to that transformation there. Okay. Then you put that through your function. So once you've taken away 5 from your value, you then put that through your function. So you do your function next. Then what would you do? The times by half or the plus 7?
Multiply.
Yeah, the multiplication next. So you do that one next, wouldn't you? So that one has to come second, which we said correspond to the stretch. And then finally, once you've done the entirety of that bit, you do the plus 7. So that's the bit which comes third. So you've just got to think, what order they come in? Well, it's the same order that you would do it in if you stuck an x value in. Does that make sense? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's have a go at this last one then. So, yep.
The stretch and x by half.
Okay, so you're doing that bit first. Is it half?
Yeah.
It's a third there.
Oh, I see. Translate.
Oh, hang on a minute. Are you sure it's a stretch in the x direction with a scale factor of a third?
Yeah.
Remember, it's the x direction. It's the opposite of what you think it should be.
Is it 4?
It's not, it's 3. Look back on your table. You think it should be a stretch in the x direction with a scale factor of a third, don't you?
Yeah.
But it's not a third, it's actually you're multiplying by 3 instead. Do you remember it's a bit like saying divide? Okay, it's a bit like dividing by a third, which is the same as multiplying by 3. Yeah, so it's the opposite of what you think it should be because it's happening to the x. So in this case, it's a scale factor of 3. Is that okay? Yeah, so just always kind of have your wits about you. If you're dealing with it in the x direction, it's usually the opposite of what you think it should be. Okay? Then what comes next?
Translation and x by -6.
So hold on a minute. It's not quite right. Do you want to have another look at that and see if you can correct it?
Is it 18?
It's not 18. It's still 6, but it's not -6. Remember, it's happening in the x direction. Yeah, good. In x direction by 6 units. Right. Good, well done. Then what?
Divide by -10 in y.
Okay. What about the negative there?
Reflection
Yeah, that's it. Which axis?
and x.
Good, well done. And then you have your, what you just said, the translation. In which direction, sorry?
-10.
But, yeah, which direction, x or y?
Oh, y.
Yeah, perfect. So in the y direction by 10 units down. So there you go, okay? Oops. And it applies in that order because I've just kind of thought about it as, well, okay, if I'm going to put a value of x into this equation, okay, so if I come along and I stick a value of x in here, well, okay, order of operations tells me that that's the first thing I should do, the multiply by a third, which of course, I know that if I'm multiplying the input values by a third, that should correspond to a stretch in the x direction by a scale factor of 3. It's the opposite of what you think it should be. Then I would come along, so once I've multiplied by a third, I then need to change those values by taking away 6. So that's the one that comes second. Okay, so that one comes first, that one comes second. Then I'd put it through my function, so I do f of all of that lot. Then I do the negative. Okay, I do the negative before I do the take away 10. So if I do the negative first, the reflection comes next, and then I do the take away 10, which is the transformation that comes fourth. Okay, so just think it's the same order as you would apply them if you stuck an x value in, so always just kind of bear that in mind. All right. Okay, are there any questions about this? No? So it's just about keeping your wits about you, particularly when you're dealing with transformations in the x direction. Okay, so translation in the x direction by 5 units to the right, even though it's a -5. And like things like this, stretch in the x direction, where you think it should be a third, it's not, it's 3. Okay, so it's always the opposite of what you think it should be. The y's tend to behave a little bit more. And then it's just really thinking about what order you're applying them in. Okay.